Welcome to the Sustainable Biomass Program Scheme Introduction module. In this training module, we will give you a comprehensive understanding of how the SBP scheme works, its normative framework, its role in supporting sustainability in the biomass and energy sector, and an overview of the certification process. Please reserve enough time to also study the SBP website and our documents alongside this module. You may want to pause from time to time and review them. Let's begin. Let's have a look at the structure of this module. First, sustainability in the biomass and energy sector. We will discuss the importance of sustainability in this sector, outline the key benefits of using sustainable biomass for energy production, and look at the challenges the SBP scheme was designed to address. Second, general information about the SBP scheme. This section will provide an overview of the Sustainable Biomass Program, its objectives, and how it operates. Third, the SBP framework. We will look a bit deeper into the structure of the SBP scheme, exploring the certification standards, guidance documents, and other resources that support effective implementation of the program. Fourth, the certification process. We will briefly walk you through the SBP certification process, including the steps involved in achieving and maintaining certification, and the roles and responsibilities of certification bodies and certificate holders. Fifth, the SBP audit portal and data transfer system, which streamline the audit and reporting process and provide a user-friendly platform for data management, reporting, and communication. Let's start with the first section. So we will start by talking about sustainability in the biomass and energy sector. Biomass plays a distinctive role in the energy mix. The headline is simple: it's renewable, it's reliable, and it's ready today. Sustainably sourced biomass complements intermittent renewables like wind and solar, and it cuts greenhouse gas emissions compared with fossil fuels. There are three reasons biomass matters in the energy mix. First, it is renewable and low carbon. Biomass is a naturally replenished resource. It delivers lower life cycle greenhouse gas emissions than fossil fuels, and it makes a meaningful contribution to decarbonization. Second, it is reliable and dispatchable. Biomass heat and power can be turned on when they are needed, which means it complements intermittent sources like wind and solar and underpins energy security. Third, it is sustainable and versatile. Biomass can be sourced responsibly. It can be safely harvested, shipped, and stored before end use, and it works across heat, power, and transport fuels, making it a flexible building block of the energy transition. While there is a common understanding that sustainable biomass is beneficial for the energy sector, the industry faces several important challenges. The first is the triple planetary crisis, the interconnected threats of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Any use of biomass must be carefully managed to avoid making this crisis worse. Second, there are differing sustainability requirements across countries, certification schemes, and stakeholder expectations. This creates a complex and fragmented landscape, placing a significant administrative burden on producers who need to demonstrate their sustainable practices. Third, only approximately 10% of the world's forest area is certified by FSC and PEFC. This means there is simply not enough certified, sustainably sourced wood to satisfy the growing demand for biomass. Fourth, the existing FSC and PEFC schemes do not cover forest carbon topics, nor do they provide data transfer tools, both of which are increasingly important for regulatory compliance and carbon accounting. So the question becomes, how do we address all of these challenges with a single, unified approach? That is exactly where SBP comes in, as a scheme built specifically to respond to these needs. Let's look at. As you can see on this map, our SBP certification scheme is finding wide application across biomass end-use sectors worldwide. SBP originally started with regulatory compliance in 4 European countries: the United Kingdom, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Each of these countries established its own set of legal requirements and incentive systems for energy producers to use sustainable biomass and to collect the required greenhouse gas data. Over time, SBP has adapted and expanded its reach. The scheme is now recognized by the European Commission under the EU Renewable Energy Directive and by Japan's regulator as well. This growing international recognition reflects SBP's ability to meet diverse regulatory needs across different markets and regions. One of the key challenges in the biomass sector has been the limited opportunity to trade between destination member states. Because different countries establish different sustainability requirements, a biomass shipment that was considered compliant in one market might not meet the criteria in another. For example, what is accepted in Belgium may not satisfy UK legislation. Imagine a vessel on its way to Europe and suddenly there is a need to change the destination and customer. The original sustainability documentation may not be sufficient for the new market. This lack of flexibility created real barriers to trade and added complexity for producers and traders across the supply chain. This diagram illustrates how these fragmented requirements limited the movement of biomass between countries, a challenge that SBP was specifically designed to address. Another significant challenge in the biomass sector is that multiple customers can mean potentially multiple audits. Many biomass producers, whether they supply wood pellets, wood chips, or other feedstocks, sell to customers in different countries, each with its own regulatory requirements. This means a single producer could face separate audits from each of their customers, all verifying whether the product is compliant with the legislation of the destination country. As you can imagine, this creates a considerable administrative burden. Producers must dedicate significant time and resources to preparing for and hosting these overlapping audits, even when the underlying sustainability practices are the same. This duplication of effort was one of the key problems the biomass industry needed to solve. And as we will see next, it is one of the challenges SBP directly addresses through its unified certification approach. So, how has SBP addressed these challenges? Three things stand out. First, credibility and recognition. SBP provides global sustainability standards that the industry trusts, and it is recognized by regulators in the UK, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Flanders, by the European Commission under the EU Renewable Energy Directive, and in Japan under the feed-in tariff FIT scheme. That regulatory standing is essential for producers who need to demonstrate compliance. Second, it is built specifically for biomass. Certification is market-driven. It functions as a license to trade in regulated markets, giving producers a direct commercial incentive to participate. And rather than duplicating existing forestry certification, SBP uses a risk-based framework that leverages FSC, PFC, and SFI, where they already apply. Third, it enables trade and continues to evolve. SBP unlocks cross-border trade between EU member states, and the scheme keeps adapting as new markets, regulations, and stakeholder expectations emerge. Biomass also plays a central role in the global bioeconomy, providing a renewable source of material for an expanding range of products, fuels, and industrial applications. As economies work to reduce reliance on fossil-based resources, biomass offers a versatile pathway across the four key areas shown on this slide. First, heat and power. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made clear that bioenergy from sustainably sourced biomass is a necessary component of the future energy mix. We already covered this sector in the previous slides. Second, transport fuels. Advanced biofuels from biomass can replace fossil fuels in hard-to-abate transport sectors. Third, construction materials. Bio-based building products are increasingly substituting fossil-derived materials in construction. And fourth, biochemicals. Within a circular resource-efficient system, sustainably sourced biomass enables the conversion of residues, byproducts, and low-value materials into high-value outputs. The bioeconomy also creates meaningful economic and social opportunities, particularly for rural and regional communities, supporting local value chains and creating employment. As demand broadens across these sectors, the importance of credible sustainability certification only grows. Now that we have explored the challenges facing the biomass sector and how SBP was created to address them, let's move on to some general information about SBP as an organization. In the next few slides, we will look at what SBP is, its key facts and figures, its governance structure, and how stakeholders can get involved. So, who is the Sustainable Biomass Program? There are three things to take away. First, what it is. SBP is a non-profit, independent, multi-stakeholder voluntary certification scheme. It was developed specifically for woody biomass, primarily pellets and wood chips, and is now expanding into adjacent areas such as biocarbon and biochar. Second, where it applies, organizations use SBP certification to demonstrate compliance with legality, sustainability, and greenhouse gas regulations, and increasingly for purposes beyond regulatory compliance. It functions as a global one-stop shop, recognized under the European Commission's Renewable Energy Directive and by regulators in the UK, Denmark, the Netherlands, Flanders, and Japan. Third, how it's designed. The scheme is underpinned by independent third-party auditing and certification carried out in accordance with ISO 17011 and ISO 17065. SBP is also a member of the ECL Alliance, adhering to internationally recognized codes of best practice, and engages in benchmarking with other schemes, including Responsible Steel, reflecting a commitment to continuous improvement and alignment with leading sustainability frameworks. Let's look at some key facts and figures that demonstrate SBP's reach and impact. To date, over 19 million tons of biomass have been certified through the SBP scheme. There are currently 422 SBP certificate holders operating across 33 countries worldwide. Importantly, SBP certified pellets account for more than 85% of European industrial pellets, which underlines the scheme's dominant role in the biomass energy market. By the time you're watching this video, the numbers may have already changed. For the most up-to-date statistics, you can visit the SBP Facts and Figures page on the SBP website. SBP publishes detailed information to keep stakeholders informed, and this slide highlights two key resources available on the SBP website. On the left, you can see the SBP annual reviews. These reports provide a comprehensive overview of SBP's activities, achievements, and developments over the past year. You can find them at the URL shown on the slide. On the right is the Facts and Figures page, which provides up-to-date statistics on certificate holders, certified volumes, and SBP's global reach. This is a live resource that is regularly updated, and the link is also displayed on screen. I encourage you to explore both of these resources to stay current with the latest data and developments within the SBP scheme. An important aspect of SBP is its evolution from a founding members organization into a broad, multi-stakeholder organization. Today, SBP invites any biomass-related party to take part in the development of its standards and the governance of the scheme. As you can see on the slide, SBP is keen to engage with all stakeholders and encourages interested parties to make contact and get involved in the work of SBP. This open and inclusive approach ensures that SBP's standards reflect the perspectives of a wide range of stakeholders, from biomass producers and end users to civil society organizations and regulators. Let's now look at how SBP is governed. As you can see in the diagram, SBP operates a multi-stakeholder governance structure. Since the beginning of 2019, SBP has operated a multi-stakeholder governance model encompassing several key bodies: the SBP Board, the SBP Secretariat, the Technical Committee, and the Standards Committee. The governance arrangements bring together stakeholder groups representing three key constituencies: civil society interests, biomass producer interests, and biomass end user interests. The board members collectively steer the future course for SBP by providing good governance and setting the overall strategy, direction, and budget. Decisions on standard setting are delegated to the Standards Committee, which makes decisions concerning certification scheme standards and provides views, advice, and recommendations on the operation of SBP to the board, other committees, and the Secretariat. The technical committee provides advice to the Secretariat, Standards Committee, and the Board on SBP's technical and scientific functions, including certification and accreditation criteria and methodologies. The day-to-day running of SBP is carried out by the SBP Secretariat. As you can see from the diagram, the Secretariat is responsible for managing the operational aspects of the scheme, from coordinating with certification bodies and certificate holders to supporting the work of the board and committees and ensuring the smooth implementation of SBP standards and processes. The Secretariat serves as the central point of contact for all stakeholders engaging with SBP. Let's now turn to the SBP normative framework. This section provides a rather brief introduction to the structure of SBP standards and related documents. Please note that there are separate, more detailed training modules available for each of the 6 SBP standards and their associated documents. In developing its normative framework, SBP follows good practices established by the ESIL Alliance. This slide summarizes the 2 main areas of best practice that SBP adheres to. The first area is scheme requirements. This covers the development and operation of the certification scheme and its standards, including regular standard revision to keep pace with evolving requirements. SBP adopts a results-oriented structure, focusing on measurable improvements in sustainability performance. Transparency is prioritized across all aspects, from decision-making and reporting to standard revisions and stakeholder engagement. There is also a fair and transparent process for handling complaints and appeals. The second area is conformance requirements. This includes engaging with relevant stakeholders throughout the certification process to ensure a comprehensive and inclusive approach. SBP invests in the training and development of auditors, ensuring they have the knowledge and expertise to effectively assess compliance. The appropriate frequency of audits is determined based on risk profiles and performance. And sanction mechanisms are in place for certificate holders and certification bodies to ensure accountability across the scheme. Our certification scheme is built on a structured set of standards, processes, and procedures designed to assess and verify an organization's compliance with clear and measurable sustainability, legality, and traceability criteria. We first launched our standards version 1.0 in 2015. 5 years later, we initiated a comprehensive revision, culminating in standards version 2.0, published in May 2023 and effective from August 2023. In April 2026, we published a version 2.1. We will discuss version changes shortly. The scheme is defined by 6 core standards. Standard 1 is the foundation. It sets out our definition of good biomass through a framework of principles, criteria, and indicators. Standards 2, 4, 5, and 6 are process-based standards. They outline the procedural requirements that certificate holders must follow depending on their role in the supply chain, whether producing, processing, trading, or using biomass. Standard 3 sets out the requirements for certification bodies, covering how they plan and conduct evaluations, assess compliance, address nonconformities, and make certification decisions. These standards are supported by instruction documents, guidance materials, and interpretations that help certificate holders and certification bodies understand and apply the requirements consistently. Standard 1 is the foundation of the SBP certification scheme. It sets out the definition of good biomass through 4 overarching principles, each supported by specific criteria and measurable indicators. The first principle requires that feedstock is legally sourced. This is assessed through 5 indicators confirming that operators and operations comply with applicable laws. The second principle ensures that feedstock sourcing does not harm the environment. It covers biodiversity, which must be maintained or enhanced, and ecosystem productivity, functions, and services, which must also be maintained or enhanced. Together, these are assessed through 15 indicators. The third principle addresses forest carbon. It requires that feedstock is only sourced from supply bases where the forest carbon stock is stable or increasing in the long term. This includes compliance with the RED III requirements for LULUCF emissions, maintenance of long-term carbon stocks, and ensuring feedstock does not compete with sourcing for long-lived wood products. These are assessed through 5 indicators. The fourth principle focuses on social outcomes, requiring that feedstock sourcing benefits people and communities. This covers decent working conditions and labor rights, as well as community benefits. Together, these are assessed through 17 indicators. In total, Standard 1 comprises 42 auditable indicators across these 4 principles. Note that 3 new indicators were added in version 2.1. This diagram illustrates the core SBP normative framework and the chain of custody for certified biomass. The chain starts with the biomass producer, who must be audited against SBP standards 1 and 2 to evaluate the sustainable origin of their feedstock. When standard 1 is applied, the biomass producer implements a supply-based evaluation, a due diligence process in which the organization identifies, assesses, and manages any risks that the feedstock sourced does not meet the requirements set out in Standard 1. This process comprises 3 elements: information gathering, risk assessment, and risk mitigation. The chain of custody then extends to traders and any other parties that take legal ownership of the biomass product before it reaches the energy producer, also known as the end user. Standards 4 and 5 are applicable to biomass producers, traders, and end users alike. End users themselves can use SBP Standard 6 for certification of their greenhouse gas calculations. And let's not forget Standard 3, which sets out the requirements for the certification bodies that audit and certify all participants in the SBP system. In the next slide, we will see how this translates into a risk-based sourcing model in practice. Now that you understand what the 6 standards cover and how they map to the supply chain, let's look at how the certification process actually works in practice. SBP is a risk-based sourcing certification scheme. This means that SBP does not certify the forest or non-forest land itself. Instead, it certifies the sourcing process and supply chain. In practice, biomass producers develop and implement what is called a supply-based evaluation, or SBE. This is a structured due diligence process with 3 key steps. First, they track the origin of their feedstock, identifying and documenting where all material entering the supply base comes from. Second, they assess the risk of sourcing against the requirements of SBP Standard 1, which defines what constitutes good biomass. Third, where any specified risks are identified, they implement mitigation measures to manage those risks effectively. There is one important exception to note: no risk assessment is required when sourcing post-consumer feedstock. This process is also sometimes referred to as due diligence in other certification schemes. The materials in scope include wood pellets, wood chips, biocarbon, black pellets, biochar, and other woody biomass feedstocks covered by the SBP scheme. With the standards and SBP certification model now generally clear, let's briefly cover the version history. There are currently 2 versions of the SBP standards available. Standards version 2.0 were initially published on the 10th of May 2023, and all certificate holders were required to transition to version 2.0 by the 9th of November 2025. Standards version 2.1 were published on the 29th of April 2026 and become effective 3 months after the publication date. A 15-month transition period will support certificate holders and stakeholders in implementing the revised requirements. It is important to note that the overall structure of the SBP normative framework remains the same across both versions. There are still 6 core standards with the same instruction documents, regional risk assessments, and supporting materials. The changes introduced in version 2.1 were limited to clarifying key requirements and aligning the standards with the EU Renewable Energy Directive. For this training, we will use standards version 2.0 as our starting point, but we will highlight version 2.1 changes wherever they are relevant. Few more words about standards version v2.1. To identify the changes, each document now includes a new Section G. Section G works as a roadmap for users, showing exactly what changed from v2.0 to v2.1 and why, making it easier to navigate the updates. We hope it will help users to quickly locate updates without rereading the full standard. The comments column explains why a change was made. The overview of changes is a non-normative document published as supporting document, a new document category for SBP that visually compares v2.0 and v2.1 using color coding, making new and revised indicators easy to spot. This document is non-normative, meaning it's a navigation and support tool, not an additional requirement. We hope you will find it useful when you need a quick orientation before diving into the full standards. Basically, you can immediately see where change happened. To support transparency, we've also published another set of supporting documents showing how stakeholder comments were addressed and what changes resulted. It is a structured tables that link stakeholder comments directly to SBP responses. In gray, you can see columns with the stakeholder comment, SBP's response, and the resulting action taken. Let's return to the general overview of SBP normative framework. This diagram summarizes the SBP normative framework and how the 6 standards relate to one another. Standards 1 and 2 deal with the feedstock, the sustainable origin and management of the biomass. As we will learn in the Standard 2 module, some biomass producers may not need to use Standard 1, and we will explain why there. Standard 3 covers the certification process itself and is used by certification bodies. Standard 4 addresses traceability or chain of custody. Standard 5 focuses on the accuracy of greenhouse gas data. And Standard 6 deals with greenhouse gas data calculation at the end of the supply chain performed by end users. These standards are supported by a glossary of terms and definitions, which explains the key terms used throughout. They are also complemented by several instruction documents, some of which are shown here, including ID1A for tree of origin and feedstock, ID5E for data, ID6D for EU red greenhouse gas requirements, and instruction documents related to benchmarking and regional risk assessments. You will also notice 2 mandatory instruction documents shown at the bottom. The SBP Red Bridging Instruction Document, which is mandatory for all participants, and the SBP Japan Instruction Document, which is mandatory for anyone exporting biomass to or using SBP biomass in Japan. Beyond the 6 standards, the SBP normative framework includes several process documents. These are the SBP appeals procedure, the SBP complaints procedure, the SBP regional risk assessment procedure, the SBP document development procedure, and the framework for benchmarking and recognition of certification systems. The framework for benchmarking and recognition is a relatively new addition. It describes SBP's approach to benchmarking and recognizing external certification systems, which we will discuss further in later modules. This slide covers 2 additional categories of normative documents: SBP regional risk assessments and SBP benchmarking reports. SBP regional risk assessments evaluate the risks in specific geographic regions, ensuring consistency between individual biomass producers' assessments and promoting active stakeholder engagement. When a regional risk assessment is in place for a particular region, biomass producers are not permitted to develop their own individual risk assessments. They must rely on the published one. The countries and regions currently covered by SBP regional risk assessments include Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Denmark, Canada, covering 4 provinces, the United States, Vietnam, and Norway. There are also SBP EU Red Level A risk assessments, and more regional risk assessments are under development. The second category is SBP benchmarking reports. These contain the results of benchmarking the FSC and PEFC certification systems against the requirements set by the SBP certification scheme. They also include an assessment of those benchmarking results against the minimum requirements for external certification system recognition by SBP. The SBP normative framework also includes a number of guidance documents to support the implementation of the standards. There is guidance available for SBP Standard 1, Standard 2, and Standard 4. For Standard 4 specifically, there is also a dedicated guidance document on the chain of custody stakeholder engagement plan. Additionally, there is guidance on SBP certification mark and trademark use, applicable to both certificate holders and certification bodies. Finally, there are user guides available for the SBP audit portal and the data transfer system. It is strongly recommended to use these guidance documents alongside the standards themselves. The final category of normative documents to be aware of is the normative interpretations list, which can be found on the SBP website. There are two sets of normative interpretations, one for version 2.0 and one for version 2.1. It is essential to take the time to go through all normative interpretations, as many of them provide very important clarifications or changes to existing normative requirements. These interpretations are updated periodically, so it is important to check for new entries regularly. Let's summarize the key points about the SBP normative framework. There are three things to take away. First, what SBP certifies. The scheme covers four areas: sustainable feedstock, chain of custody, data collection and communication, and greenhouse gas calculations. Importantly, SBP also provides the data collection mechanism that underpins those GHG calculations, so producers and end users get a single, consistent system for sourcing the numbers they need. Second, how it works. SBP relies on third-party certification carried out in line with good international practice. For non-certified feedstock, it uses a risk-based approach, and the biomass producer sits at the center of the model, inspired by a due diligence system rather than a one-size-fits-all checklist. Third, where it adds value. SBP makes maximum use of existing certification. It complements FSC, PEFC, and SFI, and plays a particularly important role in regions where forest certification coverage is limited. Uniquely among the major forest schemes, SBP also covers forest carbon and provides the GHG calculations end users need for regulatory reporting. Stakeholder input is built into both the supply base evaluation and the certification process. With the framework in mind, let's now turn to how certification is actually delivered. The next section gives a brief overview of the SBP certification process and the actors involved. More details will be presented in the dedicated module on Standard 3. This diagram shows the main parties involved in the SBP certification process. At the center are the applicants and certificate holders, the organizations seeking or maintaining SBP certification. The SBP Secretariat manages the overall scheme operations and coordinates with all parties. The certification process is overseen by independent certification bodies, which must meet strict requirements to ensure objectivity and avoid conflicts of interest. Certification bodies evaluate all certificate holder types against the relevant standards, verify risk assessments and management measures, confirm the traceability of material, and make certification decisions. To ensure the integrity and credibility of these decisions, the accreditation program is managed by the ANSI National Accreditation Board, known as ANAB, a globally recognized accreditation body. Certification bodies must obtain ANAB accreditation before they can be approved to deliver SBP certification services. Once accredited, certification bodies are subject to annual assessments conducted in accordance with the ANAB Manual of Operations for Accreditation of Product Certification Bodies. This independent oversight ensures they operate impartially and consistently, and it is complemented by SBP's own peer review process, which promotes continuous improvement and alignment of auditing practices across the scheme. Together, these three layers of oversight, certification bodies, ANAB accreditation, and SBP peer review, ensure the objectivity, consistency, and credibility of all certification decisions. SBP stakeholders play an important role throughout the process, providing input and feedback. Standard 3 is the standard for the people doing the certifying. SBP's scheme relies on third-party independent certification carried out by accredited certification bodies. and Standard 3 sets out the rules they have to follow. On the what it does side, Standard 3 specifies the requirements for certification bodies assessing conformity and compliance of organizations against the SBP standards. It doesn't replace the international baseline, it supplements ISO 17065, the recognized international standard for product certification bodies. On the what it covers side, Standard 3 defines the procedures for the 5 key stages of the certification process: preparing and conducting evaluations, ensuring those evaluations are compliant, handling any non-conformances that come up, making the certification decision, and finally issuing and managing the certificates themselves. Together, this is what makes the audit process consistent and credible, regardless of which certification body an organization chooses. Here is a summary of the key steps and features of the SBP certification process. Applicants must register in the SBP audit portal, and a public announcement of their application is made on the SBP website. Applicants also need to sign a trademark license agreement or TMLA with SBP. Certification occurs after the applicant successfully passes an audit conducted by a certification body. Stakeholder engagement is a key element throughout the process. Annual surveillance audits are required, and recertification takes place every 5 years. ANAB accreditation ensures oversight of the certification bodies themselves. And key reports, specifically the supply base report and the public summary report, are made publicly available. We will cover more details about the certification and auditing process in the dedicated module for Standard 3. There are 4 main types of SBP certificate holder scopes, each representing a different role in the SBP supply chain. The first is BP+, which stands for Biomass Producers with Risk Assessment. These are producers who source certified or non-certified feedstock and must use either RRA or their own risk assessments. The second is BP, or Biomass Producers Without Risk Assessment. These producers rely on certified processing residues feedstock or post-consumer feedstock, so they do not need to use risk assessment. The third scope is COC, which covers traders in the supply chain. Their focus is on chain of custody, ensuring the traceability of SBP certified biomass as it moves from producer to end user. And the fourth scope is end user, also COC focused. End users are the organizations at the end of the supply chain that use the SBP certified biomass for energy generation or other industrial purposes. There are differences in the certification steps for each of these scopes. We will look at these in the next few slides. Let's look at the certification process for Scope A, Biomass Producers with Risk Assessment. The process starts with signing the SBP trademark license agreement with the SBP Secretariat. The biomass producer then develops their SBP system and engages SBP stakeholders to establish the supply base evaluation, which is documented in the supply base report. After that, the biomass producer is audited by an SBP certification body accredited by ANAB. The certification body also evaluates the stakeholder engagement and writes the public summary report. The public summary report is peer-reviewed. If the certification decision is positive, the SBP certificate may be issued. At this stage, the company is entitled to use the SBP claim and the SBP data transfer system. The process for Scope B, Biomass Producers Without Risk Assessment, is less complex. It starts as before with signing the SBP trademark license agreement with the SBP Secretariat. The biomass producer then develops their SBP system and prepares the supply base report. There is no need to engage with stakeholders regarding the supply base evaluation because no individual risk assessment and effectively no risk management is required. After that, the biomass producer is audited by an SBP certification body accredited by ANAB, who writes the public summary report and issues the SBP certificate. Again, at this stage, the company is entitled to use the SBP claim and the SBP data transfer system. The most straightforward process applies to Scope C and D, biomass traders and end users, who have chain of custody only. It starts as before with signing the SBP trademark license agreement with the SBP Secretariat. The trader or end user is then audited by an SBP certification body accredited by ANAB, who issues the public summary report and the SBP certificate. As with the other scopes, at this stage, the company is entitled to use the SBP claim and the SBP data transfer system. And finally, let's look at SBP's two online platforms, the audit portal and the data transfer system. A central piece of certification management is the SBP audit portal, the digital backbone that makes the audit process consistent, auditable, and efficient. Since January 2021, the SBP audit report and supply base report have been fully digitalized in the portal. That ended reliance on static PDF and Word templates, gave us automated template version control so everyone is always working from the latest requirements, and unlocked data aggregation and reporting for quality control across the scheme. On top of digital reports, the portal runs the workflow itself. Automated reminders keep audits and reports on schedule, reviews and approvals are integrated, form-level validations catch errors at source, and an external peer review step is built into the process. Finally, the portal handles the closing steps: automated report publishing, DocuSign integration for electronic signing, and user dashboards that show things like overdue audits and pending reports. Together, this is what scales SBP certification with quality intact. The SBP Data Transfer System, or DTS, allows SBP claims to be transmitted along the supply chain. The DTS was first introduced in October 2016 and has been improved several times since, including the digitalization of the SAR report. It is important to note that DTS entries are verified by certification bodies during the audit, and the rule is that any product declared with an SBP claim must have a corresponding registration in the DTS. The DTS brings substantial benefits to the SBP system, minimizing the risk of fraud, enabling data reports, simplifying communication between buyer and seller, increasing audit efficiency and credibility, and providing a modern and flexible tool. More details on both the audit portal and the DTS are provided in separate dedicated training modules. We have reached the end of the SBP introduction module. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can always contact the SBP Secretariat using the details on screen. We recommend to regularly visit SBP website, subscribe to our newsletter, and follow us on LinkedIn. This way, you will be up to date with all the changes. You can now continue with the more detailed training modules covering each of the 6 SBP standards. Have a good day.